My sister, Chloe, spent weeks planning her baby shower. Every pastel pink decoration, every detail, was meticulously curated, not just for the gram, but for the parade of relatives coming to celebrate her first pregnancy. My husband, Ethan, and I arrived around 2, but he'd practically dragged his feet. He's an obstetrician and claimed hospital paperwork, but I knew his reluctance ran deeper. Chloe, on the other hand, had called me 4 times that week, each conversation a fresh reminder of how important the day was and how she needed her little sister by her side. Ethan and I had been married for 3 years. We met during my second year of medical school when I was shadowing in labor and delivery. He was 12 years my senior, established, confident in a way I'd found magnetic. Our relationship moved fast, maybe too fast. My mother had voiced her concerns, but I dismissed them as typical parental worry. The living room buzzed when we walked in. Aunts, cousins, and Chloe's friends clustered, balancing plates of finger sandwiches. My mother, Mrs. Hayes, near the kitchen, directed traffic with military precision. She spotted us immediately, waving us over, her smile a little strained. "Finally," she said, pulling me into a brief hug. "Chloe's been asking about you every 5 minutes." Ethan smiled politely, then excused himself to grab a drink. I watched him navigate the crowd, noticing how several women's eyes followed his tailored navy shirt, highlighting his build. He had that easy charm that first drew me in. Chloe descended the stairs like royalty. Her flowing white dress accentuated her pregnancy, her blonde hair styled in loose curls. At 7 months pregnant, or so we all believed, she had that radiant glow people talk about. Her skin seemed luminous, her smile wide and genuine as she accepted congratulations. "There she is!" Chloe squealed when she saw me, rushing over as fast as her condition allowed. Her embrace felt more performative than heartfelt. "I'm so glad you made it. And Ethan, too. Where is he?" I gestured toward the kitchen where he was talking to our cousin, Amanda. Chloe's expression flickered, something fleeting crossing her features before she plastered on another smile. "Come here, I want to show you something," she said, grabbing my hand and pulling me toward a stack of wrapped gifts. The afternoon dragged on with the usual baby shower activities. We played silly games, guessed the baby's weight, watched Chloe open an endless stream of presents, and forced smiles while eating cake that tasted like sugary cardboard. Ethan remained cordial but distant, periodically checking his phone with the distracted air of someone who wished they were anywhere else. Around 4 o'clock, Chloe called for everyone's attention. She placed both hands on her belly with theatrical flair. "Everyone, the baby's moving like crazy right now. Who wants to feel?" A chorus of excited volunteers erupted. Chloe laughed, pointing to various guests, allowing them to place their hands on her stomach. Each person made exaggerated expressions of wonder, cooing about tiny kicks. I watched, noting how quickly each guest touched and pulled away, their responses almost rehearsed. "Your turn," Chloe said, looking directly at me. I hesitated. Something felt off, though I couldn't articulate why. Maybe it was the intensity in Chloe's eyes, or the way she seemed to be watching Ethan's reaction more than mine. I approached and placed my hand gently on her belly. The fabric of her dress was smooth. I waited, expecting to feel the flutter everyone else had apparently experienced. Nothing. I pressed slightly firmer, moving my hand to different positions. Still nothing. The belly itself felt strange, somehow harder, more uniform than I'd expected. I lacked the medical expertise, but something seemed wrong. "Did you feel it?" Chloe asked, her voice pitched higher than normal. "I'm not sure," I admitted, pulling my hand back. "Ethan, you should try," Chloe said quickly. "You're a doctor. You'll definitely be able to feel the baby." Ethan, who'd been standing by the fireplace, let a flicker of reluctance cross his face before masking it with that smooth, professional charm. He crossed the room and placed his hand exactly where mine had been. The change in him was instant. His eyes, usually so calm, widened almost imperceptibly. His jaw tightened. He moved his hand across her belly, his movements no longer social, but intensely clinical. I watched the color drain from his face. "Excuse us," Ethan bit out, his hand closing around my wrist, the pressure enough to make me gasp. "Ethan, what?" He didn't let me finish. He practically yanked me towards the front door, his grip unyielding. Behind us, I heard confused murmurs. Mrs. Hayes called my name, but Ethan ignored everyone. We burst through the front door into the late afternoon sunlight. Ethan released my wrist and immediately pulled out his phone. "Call an ambulance," he commanded, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Right now?" "What? Why?" My mind raced. "Didn't you notice when you touched her belly?" His hands shook as he stared at his phone, his finger hovering over the emergency call button. "Notice what?" "Ethan, you're scaring me." He looked up, and the expression on his face made my blood run cold. I'd seen Ethan maintain composure through complicated deliveries, through emergencies that would make most people faint. I'd never seen fear in his eyes like this. "That wasn't a baby," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "That was a tumor." The world tilted sideways. My knees buckled and I grabbed the porch railing. The sounds of the party inside faded to white noise as his words echoed. "What do you mean, a tumor?" "I've been doing this for 15 years, Ethan said, his professional training apparently overriding his emotional response. "I know what a pregnant belly feels like, how it moves, the resistance of amniotic fluid. What I felt in there was a solid mass, irregular, dense in a way that's completely wrong. This is bad. This is really, really bad." The front door opened. Mrs. Hayes stepped out, her face creased with concern. "What's going on out here?" "Chloe's upset. Everyone's confused." "Mrs. Hayes, your daughter needs to go to the hospital immediately," Ethan interrupted. "I believe she has a large abdominal mass that requires urgent medical evaluation." My mother's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally, horror. "But she's pregnant. She's 7 months pregnant. I've seen her growing. She talks about the baby. When was her last ultrasound?" Ethan's voice sharpened. "What doctor has she been seeing? What hospital is she registered at for delivery?" The questions hung in the air. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face paled. She mentioned appointments. She showed us an ultrasound picture months ago. I assumed she had everything arranged. "Mrs. Hayes, I need you to listen carefully," Ethan said, his doctor voice fully engaged now. "If your daughter has a tumor large enough to mimic a 7-month pregnancy, she's in immediate danger. Depending on the type, this could be life-threatening. We need to get her to imaging right now." I finally found my voice. "This doesn't make sense. How could she not know? How could everyone just assume?" The pieces started assembling in my mind like a jigsaw puzzle I'd been staring at without seeing the full picture. Chloe's announcement 9 months ago, her vague responses about doctor visits, the way she deflected when I offered to come to an appointment, her insistence that Ethan attend today. "Oh God," I whispered. Ethan met my eyes, and I saw confirmation of my suspicions in his expression. My mother looked between us, still not understanding. "Someone needs to explain what's happening right now," Mrs. Hayes insisted. Before either of us could respond, Chloe appeared in the doorway, her face flushed, her hands protectively cradling her belly. "Why are you telling them these horrible lies?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "I'm pregnant. I'm having a baby." "Ethan, why would you say those things?" The desperation in her voice made my stomach turn. Ethan stepped forward, his demeanor shifting into the calm, authoritative doctor I'd seen him become in crisis situations. "Chloe, listen to me carefully. I need you to go to the hospital right now for imaging. What I felt is not consistent with pregnancy. I believe you have a growth that needs immediate medical attention." You're wrong, Chloe insisted, but her voice wavered. You barely touched me. You don't know. I do know, Ethan said gently but firmly. Please, let us help you. This can't wait. Chloe's facade cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and her whole body began to shake. She looked at me with an expression that contained equal parts guilt, fear, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Mrs. Hayes moved toward her, maternal instinct overriding confusion. She wrapped her arms around Chloe, who collapsed against her shoulder. Sweetheart, we need to get you checked out, my mother said, her voice surprisingly steady. Whatever's happening, we'll deal with it together. Ethan had his phone out, already calling 911. I stood frozen on the porch, unable to process everything. The ambulance arrived within 12 minutes. Paramedics loaded Chloe onto a stretcher while confused baby shower guests watched from the windows. Mrs. Hayes rode in the ambulance while Ethan and I followed in our car. The drive to the hospital felt surreal. Ethan gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, his jaw clenched tight. I wanted to ask him the questions burning in my mind, but fear kept me silent. Fear of the answers. Fear of what those answers would mean for everything I thought I knew. The emergency room was packed when we arrived. Ethan used his hospital credentials to get updates, speaking with the ER doctors while Mrs. Hayes and I waited in uncomfortable plastic chairs. My father arrived shortly after, having rushed from his office downtown. His normally composed face showed cracks of worry as my mother explained the situation in hushed tones. Hours passed in that fluorescent-lit waiting room. Family members started appearing, my Aunt Eleanor, my Aunt Sharon, Chloe's best friend Sophia. Everyone wanted answers nobody could provide yet. Around 11 that night, over 7 hours after we'd arrived, a doctor emerged from the restricted area. She looked exhausted, her scrubs wrinkled. Chloe's immediate family? Dr. Miller asked. We followed her to a private consultation room. We've completed CT scans and ultrasound imaging, Dr. Miller said, pulling up results on a computer screen. Your daughter has a large ovarian tumor, approximately 30 centimeters in diameter. That's roughly the size of a basketball. Based on the imaging characteristics, it appears to be a mature cystic teratoma, though we won't know definitively until pathology. My mother made a small, wounded sound. My father's hand found hers and gripped tight. The tumor has caused a torsion. The ovary has twisted on itself, cutting off blood supply. This is a surgical emergency. We need to operate tonight to remove the tumor and assess the ovary. There's also concern for malignancy given the size and some characteristics we're seeing on imaging. Cancer, my father repeated as if hearing the word for the first time. We won't know definitively until we run pathology after removal, but we need to prepare for that possibility. Stage 3 or 4, given the size and duration of growth. I'm being honest with you because you need to understand the severity. The doctor continued explaining procedures and risks, but I barely heard her. My mind kept returning to one inescapable fact: Chloe had known something was wrong. She'd felt her body changing, developing symptoms that didn't match pregnancy. Instead of seeking medical help, she'd convinced herself, convinced everyone, that she was carrying a baby. Why? Ethan appeared in the doorway after Dr. Miller left. His face was drawn, older-looking in the harsh hospital lighting. They're taking her to surgery in 20 minutes, he said quietly. The team is prepping now. My mother started crying. My father held her, his own eyes red-rimmed. My Aunt Eleanor sat silently in the corner, her face blank with shock. How did this happen? My mother asked no one in particular. How did we not know? I had no answer. None of us did. The surgery lasted 4 hours. We waited in the surgical family room, drinking terrible coffee and speaking in hushed fragments. Nobody knew what to say. Finally, around 4 a.m, Dr. Miller returned. She still wore her surgical cap, dark circles under her eyes. The surgery went as well as could be expected, she said. We removed the tumor and her right ovary. The left ovary appears healthy, so she'll retain some ovarian function. The tumor was indeed a teratoma, but the pathology will take a few days to determine if there are malignant components. Can we see her? My mother asked. She's in recovery now. Once she's stable and moved to a room, yes, but I need to prepare you. She's very confused and upset. She keeps insisting she was pregnant. The words hung heavy in the air. Ethan and I left the hospital around 6 in the morning. Dawn was breaking over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that seemed obscenely beautiful given the circumstances. We drove home in silence. Once inside, I went straight to the bathroom and threw up. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching helplessly. When I finally finished, I sat back against the cool tile wall and looked up at him. You knew, I said. That's why you didn't want to come today. He didn't deny it. His silence confirmed everything. How long? I asked. Ethan slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor across from me. He looked utterly exhausted. About 3 months ago, she came to my office. Said she wanted a second opinion on her pregnancy because something felt off. I examined her, my heart hammered against my ribs. I told her immediately that what I was feeling wasn't right. I couldn't say definitively without imaging, but my professional opinion was that she needed emergency evaluation. I gave her referrals to 3 different specialists. I called one of them myself and asked them to fit her in urgently, but she didn't go. It wasn't a question, I stated. She called me 2 days later, angry. Said I was trying to ruin her happiness, that I was jealous she was having a baby when we couldn't. She accused me of medical incompetence and threatened to file a formal complaint if I told anyone about the examination, said I'd violated patient confidentiality. The reference to our infertility stung. Ethan and I had been trying to conceive for 18 months without success. It was a source of quiet pain in our marriage, something we didn't discuss much, but that colored every pregnancy announcement from friends and family. She knew, I said slowly, that seeing her pregnant would hurt me. She knew, and she weaponized it. There's more, Ethan said. She called me 4 more times over the next 2 months. Always late at night, leaving voicemails that alternated between begging me not to tell anyone and threatening legal action if I did. She claimed she'd gotten a second opinion that confirmed everything was fine. Said I was wrong, that I'd misdiagnosed her, that she'd prove me wrong when she delivered a healthy baby. I stared at him, struggling to reconcile this image of my sister with the person I thought I knew. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to. God, you have no idea how many nights I stayed awake trying to figure out a way to say something without violating ethics rules. But she was technically my patient for that examination, even though she's family. If I disclosed without her explicit permission, I could lose my license. I talked to the hospital's legal team and ethics board without using her name. They all said the same thing: I'd done my duty by giving her referrals and urging immediate follow-up. Beyond that, my hands were tied by confidentiality laws. So, you just waited? What else could I do? Ethan's voice cracked. I kept hoping she'd come to her senses, get help on her own. I even called the specialists I'd referred her to, asking if she'd made appointments. None of them had heard from her. I was terrified, but legally I couldn't force her into treatment. We sat in silence on the bathroom floor. The weight of secrets and lies pressed down on both of us. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother: she's awake and in her room. 5:47, she's asking for you. I showed the message to Ethan. He nodded but said nothing. I don't think I can see her right now, I admitted. I don't know what I'd say. Take whatever time you need, Ethan said. Nobody can fault you for that. But guilt gnawed at me anyway. Whatever Chloe had done, she was still my sister. She just had emergency surgery, was facing a possible cancer diagnosis, and she was asking for me. I forced myself to stand. I need to go back, but I'm going alone. Ethan nodded, understanding. The hospital was quieter in the early morning hours. I found room 547 at the end of a long corridor. Through the small window in the door, I could see Chloe in the bed, my mother sitting beside her. I pushed the door open. Chloe's eyes found mine immediately. She looked small and fragile against the white sheets, and 4-line in her arm, monitors beeping softly. "Hey," she croaked, her voice rough from intubation. "Hey," I echoed, staying near the door. "I'm sorry," Chloe said, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. "I'm so sorry." My mother glanced between us, sensing undercurrents she didn't fully understand. "Sorry for what, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Chloe's eyes stayed locked on mine. She knew that I knew. Maybe not all of it yet, but enough. "For lying," Chloe whispered. "For all of it. For everything." The apology felt inadequate. How do you apologize for 9 months of lies? For planning a baby shower while ignoring life-threatening symptoms? For manipulating your family's emotions? "We'll talk about it later," I said, my voice flat. "Right now, you need to rest and heal." "Please don't hate me," Chloe begged, her voice rising before she winced in pain. "I know I messed up. I know I should have listened to Ethan, but I was scared and then it went too far and I didn't know how to stop." Later, I repeated firmly. "This isn't the time." My mother looked confused and concerned, but she didn't press. I stayed for 10 minutes, mostly in silence, before excusing myself. The pathology results came back 4 days later: malignant ovarian cancer, stage 3, with some features suggesting possible stage 4 spread. Chloe would need aggressive chemotherapy, possibly additional surgery, and years of careful monitoring. The prognosis was guarded. 5-year survival rates hovered around 40 to 50%. Family rallied as expected. Casseroles appeared at my parents' house. Friends organized meal trains and care packages. Everyone expressed shock and sympathy, talking about how terrible it must have been to think you're pregnant, only to discover cancer. Nobody knew the full truth. My mother suspected something deeper was wrong, but didn't push for details. Ethan and I kept what we knew to ourselves, bound by his professional ethics and my own complicated feelings about exposing my sister during her medical crisis. But I couldn't move past the manipulation and lies. 3 weeks after the surgery, Chloe moved back to my parents' house for recovery and chemotherapy. My mother called regularly, asking me to visit, saying Chloe was depressed and needed family support. I finally drove over on a Saturday afternoon. Chloe sat propped up on the living room couch, looking pale and drawn. She'd already lost weight, and her hair, which would soon fall out from chemotherapy, hung limp around her face. "Can we talk?" she asked when my mother left us alone. "Outside?" We went to the backyard patio. The late summer sun beat down on the wooden deck furniture. Chloe moved slowly, carefully, one hand pressed against her healing incision. "I need to explain," she started. "You don't owe me an explanation." The words came out harsher than I intended. "Yes, I do. You're my sister. You deserve to know why." I waited, arms crossed defensively. Chloe took a shaky breath. "About 10 months ago, I started feeling sick, nauseous, tired, gaining weight. I took a pregnancy test and it was positive. I was thrilled. You know, I've always wanted kids. I didn't see a doctor right away. I just started a new job and was in the waiting period for insurance coverage. I figured I'd wait the 60 days until benefits kicked in. By then, I was about 8 weeks along, or so I thought." "That still doesn't explain the rest," I said coldly. "Around week 12, I finally got insurance and made an appointment. But the night before, I started having terrible pain, sharp, stabbing pains in my abdomen. I was terrified of miscarrying, so I didn't go. I convinced myself it was normal pregnancy pain. Chloe's voice trembled. The pain came and went over the next few weeks. Sometimes it was unbearable, sometimes just a dull ache, but I kept gaining weight. My belly kept growing. I was sure I was pregnant. Every symptom matched what I read online. Except you never saw a doctor. I was scared. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. Scared of what they'd tell me. Scared I'd miscarried and my body just hadn't caught up. Scared there was something wrong with the baby. So, I kept putting it off, kept telling myself everything was fine. For 7 months. For 9 months, Chloe corrected quietly. I announced the pregnancy after I was already 3 months along. I'd been hiding it, waiting to make sure everything was okay. But by then, I was in too deep with a lie. I stared at her, trying to understand the mental gymnastics required to maintain such a massive delusion. What about the ultrasound picture you showed everyone? Chloe had the grace to look ashamed. I found it online from someone's Facebook page. I cropped out their name and information. And when Ethan examined you, told you to get help immediately? I convinced myself he was wrong, Chloe said desperately. He's an obstetrician, not a radiologist or oncologist. I thought maybe he was just being overly cautious or that he felt something unusual with the baby's position. I couldn't accept what he was saying because accepting it meant admitting I'd been living a lie for months. You threatened him, tried to intimidate him into silence. Chloe flinched. I panicked. If he told you or Mom or anyone, the whole story would collapse. Everyone would know I'd been lying. I'd lose everything. The attention, the excitement, the feeling of being special for once in my life. The last part caught my attention. What does that mean? Chloe looked away, unable to meet my eyes. You don't know what it's like being your sister. You're the one who went to medical school. You're the one who married a successful doctor. You're the smart one, the accomplished one, the daughter everyone's proud of. I've always been just there, the older sister who couldn't quite measure up. For 9 months, I wasn't invisible anymore. The manipulation cut deeper knowing its motivation. All of this, the lies, the fake shower, the ignored medical emergency because my sister felt inadequate. There's something else, Chloe said quietly. Something about Ethan. My blood ran cold. What about him? Nothing happened, she said quickly. I need to be clear about that. Nothing physical ever happened between us, but I developed feelings for him over the past year or so. The confession shouldn't have surprised me after everything else, but it still knocked the wind from my lungs. He was always so kind to me at family gatherings, Chloe continued. He'd ask about my work and actually listen. He made me feel interesting and valued. I developed a crush that I knew was wrong, but couldn't control. And the baby shower, Chloe's tears flowed freely now. I wanted him to feel the baby move. I thought if he touched my stomach and felt life inside, it would create some kind of connection between us. Some moment we'd share. I fantasized that maybe he'd realize he had feelings for me, too. It sounds completely insane now. It sounds insane because it is insane, Chloe. You built an entire fantasy around my husband while lying about being pregnant and ignoring a tumor that could have taken your life. Do you understand how twisted that is? Yes, she sobbed. Yes, I understand. I understand that I destroyed everything. Our relationship, your trust, probably your marriage, too. I understand that I'm a terrible person. Stop it, I said coldly. Don't make yourself the victim. You made choices. Deliberate choices that hurt people. Own them. Chloe looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Can you ever forgive me? I didn't have an answer. The question felt too big, too complicated to address while anger still burned hot in my chest. I don't know, I admitted. Right now, I'm angry and hurt and honestly disgusted. Maybe time will change that. Maybe it won't. Focus on getting better. Deal with your health first. We can figure out the rest later. I left without saying goodbye. Over the following months, Chloe underwent 6 cycles of aggressive chemotherapy. The treatments hit her hard. Hair loss, severe nausea, fatigue so profound she could barely get out of bed some days. My mother bore the brunt of caregiving, and the strain showed in her face. I visited occasionally, maintaining civil but distant interactions. I helped with practical matters, driving Chloe to appointments, picking up prescriptions, coordinating insurance paperwork. But I kept an emotional wall between us that I wasn't ready to dismantle. Family members commented on the tension, asking if we'd had a fight. I deflected their questions, unwilling to air the full truth. While Chloe battled for her life, Ethan returned to work, but seemed more withdrawn than usual. The situation had affected him, too. Made him question his judgment and feel guilty for keeping secrets, even when bound by professional ethics. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently, he told me one evening. Maybe if I'd pushed harder, found some way to force intervention. You did everything you could within the law, I interrupted. She made her own choices. You can't take responsibility for them. But I understood his guilt. I carried my own version. Maybe if I'd been a better sister, more attentive, less wrapped up in my own life, I would have noticed something was wrong. The rational part of my brain knew this thinking was pointless. Chloe was an adult who'd made adult decisions. But the irrational part kept circling back to what-ifs. 6 months into treatment, Chloe's scans showed significant improvement. The tumors were shrinking, her markers decreasing. The oncologist expressed cautious optimism while emphasizing she'd need years of monitoring. My mother organized a small dinner at the house to celebrate. Just immediate family. The atmosphere was subdued but genuinely happy. Seeing Chloe's obvious relief at the good news softened something in my chest. After dinner, Chloe asked to talk with me privately. We ended up in her old bedroom, sitting on the twin bed we'd shared during childhood sleepovers. I've been seeing a therapist, Chloe said. Mom insisted after I finally told her everything. My therapist says I have deep-seated self-esteem issues and a pattern of seeking external validation to fill internal voids. That sounds accurate, I said. I'm working on it. On myself. Trying to understand why I do the things I do and how to be better, healthier, more honest. I nodded but didn't respond verbally. I don't expect you to forgive me, Chloe continued. I don't even know if I'd forgive me in your position. But I want you to know I'm genuinely trying to change, to be someone worthy of your forgiveness someday, even if that day never comes. For the first time since the baby shower, I felt something crack in the wall I'd built between us. Not crumble, but crack. A small fracture that let in a sliver of light. Keep working on yourself, I said carefully. For you, not for me or anyone else. That's the only way forward. You're right, Chloe agreed. My therapist says the same thing. Time moved forward. Chloe continued treatment and therapy. Ethan and I started couples counseling to work through the strain the situation had placed on our marriage. My parents adjusted to their new normal of supporting a daughter with cancer. Slowly, incrementally, things began to heal. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. 14 months after the baby shower, Ethan and I found out I was pregnant. The news came with a complicated mix of joy and anxiety. We'd wanted this for so long, but now the announcement felt weighted with consideration for Chloe's feelings. I agonized over how to tell her. Ethan suggested we wait until after the first trimester, but keeping another secret felt wrong after everything we'd been through. I drove to my parents' house on a Saturday morning. Chloe came over for weekly family brunches now. I pulled her aside before everyone gathered. "I need to tell you something," I said, my hands shaking slightly. "I'm pregnant. About 9 weeks." I watched emotions play across Chloe's face, surprise, a flash of pain, then something that looked like genuine happiness. "Congratulations," she said, and her smile seemed real. "That's wonderful news. You and Ethan will be amazing parents. I wanted you to hear it from me first." Chloe pulled me into a hug. "Thank you for that. I know this must have been hard to tell me, given everything, but I'm truly happy for you." She pulled back and looked me in the eyes. "I mean it. Whatever twisted feelings I had before, I've dealt with them in therapy. This baby is a blessing, and I'm excited to be an aunt." I wanted to believe her. Chose to believe her. The pregnancy progressed normally. Chloe attended my baby shower, a much smaller, simpler gathering than the elaborate event she'd planned for herself. She helped with decorations, made appropriate conversation with guests, and seemed genuinely supportive. My daughter was born on a mild April morning, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with a full head of dark hair. We named her Grace Eleanor, the middle name honoring my aunt. Chloe came to meet her niece the day after delivery. She held Grace carefully, tears streaming down her face. "She's perfect," Chloe whispered. "Absolutely perfect." I watched my sister cradle my daughter and felt the last pieces of my anger finally dissolve. We would never return to the relationship we'd had before. Too much had happened. Too many lines crossed. But maybe we could build something new. Something more honest, even if less innocent. "Thank you," I said. Chloe looked up, confused. "For what?" "For getting help when you did. For surviving. For doing the work to become better." Fresh tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you for giving me the chance, for not cutting me out completely. I didn't deserve your patience." We stayed in that hospital room for another hour, Chloe holding Grace while we talked about normal things, nursery colors, feeding schedules, the exhausting reality of newborn care. Sister conversation, the kind we hadn't had in over a year. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. Forgiveness felt too simple a word for the complex tangle of emotions I still carried. But it was acceptance. An acknowledgement that people were complicated, that they made terrible mistakes, and sometimes if they did the work, they could earn back small pieces of what they'd lost. As Chloe handed Grace back and prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I don't think I've ever said that before, but I am." "You'll find your path, too," I replied. "When you're ready, when you're healthy." She nodded and slipped out. Ethan returned shortly after with coffee and bagels. He looked at me curiously. "Everything okay?" I saw Chloe leaving. "Yeah," I said, meaning it. "Everything's okay." He kissed my forehead and went to check on Grace, who was sleeping peacefully in her bassinet. I watched my small family, my husband, my daughter, the life we'd built together, and felt gratitude wash over me. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Chloe still had years of cancer monitoring ahead. Our relationship would require continued work and boundary setting. Life would throw more challenges our way, but we'd survived the worst. Uncovered lies, confronted hard truths, and emerged on the other side still standing. That had to count for something. 2 years later, Chloe met someone at a cancer support group. Another survivor, a man named Daniel, who understood her journey without judgment. They dated slowly, carefully, building a foundation of honesty that had been missing from her previous relationships. She called me when he proposed, her voice bubbling with excitement and nerves. I said, "Yes," she told me. "Is that crazy? Do you love him?" I asked. "Yes, so much it scares me sometimes." "Does he know everything about the fake pregnancy? All of it?" "Yes," Chloe said firmly. I told him on our third date. I figured if he couldn't handle my past, better to know early. But he stayed. Then it's not crazy, I said. You deserve happiness, Chloe. The wedding was small and intimate. Chloe wore a simple dress, her hair grown back in soft curls after finishing chemotherapy. She glowed with genuine joy. I stood beside her as maid of honor. Grace, now an energetic 3-year-old, served as flower girl and took her responsibilities very seriously, scattering petals with intense concentration. During the reception, Chloe pulled me aside. I couldn't have gotten here without you, she said. Without your willingness to keep the door open even when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for not giving up on yourself, I replied. We stood together watching our parents dance, Grace running between tables with other children from the wedding party. Ethan chatted with Daniel near the bar. Do you think Mom and Dad ever figured out the whole truth? Chloe asked quietly. I think they know enough, I said. They've chosen to focus on moving forward. That's generous of them. That's what families do when they're healthy. They mess up. They hurt each other, but they also choose growth when possible. Chloe leaned her head on my shoulder, a gesture from childhood that felt both familiar and strange. I'm really glad you're my sister, she said. Me, too, I responded, surrounded by celebration and hope. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How do you navigate a family love that's so deep, yet so messy, after a betrayal like that?